As I get older, there's a lot of art that I appreciate, mostly because I think about what the artist is trying to convey. I think about the artist rather than just looking at the piece. I'm looking at context.
Welcome to the Visual Literacy Project Talks. I'm Kevin Wenning. In these interviews, I talk with visual creators across various disciplines about why we create the art that we do. Why and how do some people cultivate deep knowledge and skills to communicate powerfully with their craft? Why do certain visual styles really connect with us and others don't? When I don't understand a photograph or an artwork, I want to speak with the artist so I can reach an appreciation of their style that I never would have come to on my own. And that really is the purpose of Visual Literacy Project. These interviews are best viewed at visualliteracyproject.com, where you can view the full-length videos, also see examples of the artworks that we're talking about during these interviews, and find links to the artists and to their online galleries. My conversation today is with Scott Norris. He's a photographer and been a personal friend for a little while. I've learned a lot from Scott. The thing I think I most appreciate about his photography is I think he sits neatly between the photography purists who say everything has to be published straight out of camera, you don't retouch your photos, and then the complete opposite end of the spectrum where I'm going to composite 50 images together into one frame to make an artistic image. I think he sits nicely in the middle where he's, I think, sometimes capturing photography in the moment where he's an opportunistic photographer. He carries his camera with him and photographs things that he finds while he's just out and about, looking for an interesting scene or an interesting composition. And then sometimes he sets up a scene and he's staging something with the intent of drawing out an emotion and really creating something that connects with you. In the end, he's taking all of these images and really trying to create an artistic image out of them. And like I said, not on one end of the spectrum or the other where it's, completely pure photography or completely composited imagery, but thinking of one image on its own as just a component of the final artwork. So without me blabbering on about it, let's talk to Scott and look at some of his artworks. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Scott Norris. All about Scott. Who are we talking to today? So some of you guys probably know Scott Norris. Scott is a native Texan, currently living in Milwaukee on the east side with his wife and one son. He's been shooting on and off since 1982, and Scott's career outside of photography is a 3D animation motion graphic effects person. Scott creates emotion, mood, and atmosphere with his photographs. Each photo is a very personal journey, exposing his own fears, triumphs, beliefs, shortcomings, whether landscape, architecture, still life, and macro. Scott shoots mostly spontaneously with surroundings dictating what's photographed, and shooting is only the first step. It's a jumping off point. Then he takes the raw images, creates what he sees in his mind's eye, coaxing out textures, sometimes adding them, enhancing contrast, lights and darks, creating moods and emotions that he felt and wants you to feel. Scott's process is about listening to his heart, his mind, and creating a visual representation of what he felt the moment the shutter is released.
Kind of to the point, it took me probably months to write that. I hate writing artist statements, and especially everywhere I go, they say, you got to write it in the third person. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. That's not who I am. If someone else writes my artist statement and comes up with something, that's okay. But if I write it, it's going to be in first person. I don't care what they say. It sounds really pretentious to me, and that's not who I am. So
it's important to go through the process of putting it down on paper and just rather than just in your head, because the way that you perceive your art in your head may not be how somebody else perceives it. And so you got to tell people, here's what I intend when you look at my art, because you're not there standing next to him when they view that picture on the wall and they go, okay, now I can see what he was working towards.
Yeah. It's always good to let your art stand by itself. Because that in the end, you want to create something with the viewer. But it is nice to know what the artist was trying to do. So I think that's why artist statements are nice, because you can read that and then say, okay, now I'm going to look at these images. I usually go the other way around when I'm at a gallery. I look at the images and then read the statement.
As do I.
Because I don't want to have preconceived notions of what they want me to see. I want to see it first. And then sometimes I'll read it and go, oh, and I'll go back and look at it again and it has a new meaning.
What is your 39 project? What are you doing with that gallery or that printer?
That I was, I don't know how they found me. I think they were just looking through Fine Art America, actually, which is another site that I'm on where I sell my work. They were looking for artists to ask questions because they were going to launch this site. And I say they, it's Miller's Labs, which is one of the premier Miller. Is it Miller's Labs or Miller Labs? Miller Labs.
I think it's Miller.
Anyways, they also own MPix, which is their commercial version. They've been around for 80 years or so, and they're one of the premier printing shops. And they wanted to launch something where they were selling photography. And so the wonderful young lady interviewed me. She asked me all these different questions about what I was looking for in a printer, in a website. And she liked my work, and they said that we want to include you as one of our original 39. And 39 was, Miller started in 1939. Photography was invented in 1839, so that's where the 39 comes from.
Okay.
But it's just the premier, it's high quality prints and frames and stuff like that. So I'm dumbfounded that I was included in that. I'm looking at some of the other artists in there, and I'm like, really? I'm included in that? That's awesome.
Is this live now? They've already launched it?
It is live. Yep, March 1st. Hopefully sometime in April or May, I'll find out how lucrative it is.
Well, it's an honor just to be included there, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple people that you know in there. Janice Sullivan. She was one. She might have. She was part of the Arcana Musketeers.
Founding 30. I recognize Ken Kameneski in there.
Yep.
Photographer Sean Hazelton.
Lori Novak.
Janice
is
Lori.
one of them.
I haven't seen much from Janice lately.
She's busy with her own podcast.
Let's see, who else do I recognize in here? The Scott Norris guy.
Yeah, I don't know about him. But I mean, these are all over the world, and all different styles.
Well, congratulations on that.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm gonna have to go check out all of those artists.
I'm excited about it, especially since they're associated with Miller, because there are a lot of places you can get your stuff printed, and there's places you can get stuff printed cheaper than Miller. But when you sign up you have to have a professional account to print through Miller. Mm-hmm. They're fantastic.
Full service lab, or they only do like wall art?
They're a full service lab. I don't know if they do film, but I know they used to, because I started in 39. There wasn't digital, so but the quality is incredible. They ship overnight, so if I ordered something today, it would be here in the morning. And the shipping's free.
Scott, thank you for doing this with me. And I wanted to have you on right at the beginning when I'm getting these started because, and just an aside here, it has nothing to do with what we're talking about today, but Scott got me involved in something several years ago. I don't know how long ago that was, 2015, 16, called the Arcanum. I don't even know if it still exists.
It does not.
But it was a creative community to work with, a mentor. So somebody who's learning photography to work with, somebody who's amazing at their skill like Scott, just to teach us all sorts of things and give us sort of a guided process that we can work with to grow our photography and take it to the next levels. And through that process, that's what led me to doing these talks and my own curiosity about why people create the art that they do, because that opened me up to all sorts of other artists and styles of photography, things I hadn't really thought about. And when you're stuck in a rut creatively, it's always good to go view what other people are doing and then pick their brains and say, why do you do that? Why do you see the world that way? And that's what this series of interviews is all about, and understanding, when I look at some pieces of art and photography still, I just look at it and I go, I don't get it. Why that doesn't speak to me. Mm-hmm. And then when I can spend a little time with the artist, a lot of times their backstory just opens me up to a whole new world that I hadn't thought of before. And that's what these talks are all about.
Yeah, I think that's really important in knowing why the artist has done something If you don't get it, find out why the artist did it. It's frustrating for me sometimes when I go to the art museum here and there's a piece and I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Then I'd look at the title to see if there's something in the title, and they call it Untitled 37. Like, okay, that doesn't help me. That's one of the things I try to do with my images is either get a description or a title that says something about what I'm feeling. Not necessarily is it like sometimes I'll pick a quote or a song title or something that fits with what I was feeling. It might not be exactly about what the image is showing, but it shows my feelings. So
yeah, that's a whole side conversation, whether or not you should name your pieces and put a description with them. I don't want to go off on that tangent too far, but yeah, Untitled 37 doesn't do anything for me. I'm like, oh,
no.
Okay. Help me out a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
Has your art always been a part of your life, or when did it start?
Oh gosh. I think it has. I don't really remember much before the 80s, right when the 80s started. I mean, I was a kid, so I was always drawing and doing stuff, but I never really thought of myself as, oh, I'm going to go into art. And I never was the kid that was always drawing stuff. I was always interested in visuals. Although at that time I wanted to be an engineer so I could build robots. But then I got into math and I decided, okay, I don't want to be an engineer anymore. Algebra I'm okay with.
Calculus, like robots that much.
Yeah, calculus, I'm like, okay, this is starting to get weird. And integral equations and differential equations, I'm like, okay, I can't think of that in my head, so I'm going to do something else. So, but it was in 1982 when I think I was a freshman in high school, and decided to take a photography course, and that just opened it. I'm like, okay, this is it. This is what I wanted to do. So,
did somebody encourage you down that path, or you said, hey, I want some easy credits? Yeah, photography, that looks good.
Well, I knew people that talked about the photography teacher, and he was a really cool guy. His name was George Hamilton. His dad was the sheriff of Brazos County, I think. And so he was a big guy, and he had this way about him, and he was one of the guys. You know, he was one of the teachers that was always getting into trouble with administration for not doing things the way teachers should do it. And this being in the early 80s, corporal punishment was still a big deal, and he had these paddles on the wall that he would paddle kids with. But it got to the point that you wanted to be paddled because you got to sign it. And so after a while, there was no punishment. It's just like, I want to sign the paddle. So he said, all right, bend over, and he'd hit you a couple times and you'd sign the paddle. And he was just a guy that he was one of us. That's what we felt. And he was so good at coaxing out your interests. He would look at images and say, you know, I see you're doing that. Keep doing this. Do it this way. Try it that way. And of course, those days it was all film. So he taught us how to do stuff in the darkroom, and that just got me going. And that's why I always think it's important to find people that not necessarily know more than you, but have been on the path longer. Because I never think of this as I'm better than anybody. I've just been walking the path, and you're welcome to join me. And I want to show you where I've been. And that's why I think it's so important to find other people that do this, because you learn so much. And so through that, I went through high school and college, where I was going to be a National Geographic photographer, and realized that you don't work for National Geographic, you're a freelancer. I thought, oh, that means I have to actually do other stuff first. Okay. So I decided I was going to be a photojournalist, and realized that that's not my thing. Was fine art. I didn't want to do journalism. Mm-hmm. So when I lost access to the darkroom, that's when my photography stopped for a while.
How long did you pursue that, like the National Geographic / journalist path, and decided that wasn't where you wanted to go?
I decided that I wasn't going to do that before I graduated. So that's when I got a
professional time on it.
No, I just realized that I don't want to spend the time to do that, because I knew. Well, I didn't know. I was a kid, so I don't know anything. I just know I didn't feel like that was the direction I wanted to go. So I said, well, I got to do something. I got to get a job now that I'm graduating with a photojournalism degree, and I don't want to be a journalist. So I went into television, and through working in news production, through that, I got the bug of saying I want to do 3D animation. So I learned on the job, and I've been doing that since '93. So quite a
So did
few
that
years.
take over your life for a while and you didn't work on
Yeah.
the photography?
Yeah. And it actually helped when digital came around to where you could actually do photography where it was almost as good as film. And I think now it's better than film in terms of your resolution. Film is always going to have a special place. And I think, there's something that the organicness of film that is better than digital, but, because I was doing 3D animation where I'm creating something from nothing, someone comes up and said, we need this creature to walk across the screen, or we did a spot in, when I was in San Antonio where they wanted water droplets on the side of a Corona cooler to come to life and knock the bottle caps out of the bottle cap holder that used to be in those old school coolers,
Yeah.
to knock the bottle caps across the room to hit the rabbit ears on the TV so they could watch the soccer game. And so we had to create all that.
That's a fun storyboard.
Yeah. It was live action mixed with animation. But through that helped me when I started getting into photography to not think of as, okay, I'm going to go straight out of camera. That's why I think that the film or what I shoot digitally is just the jumping off point.
Right.
Like, oh, this is
one
my base.
piece of the whole storyboard, and you can put other pieces with it and create something more interesting.
Yeah, and because I came from that frame of mind and had used Photoshop since the very beginning, I think I had a leg up on some people because I've been using Photoshop for so long that it's second hand to me. I'm not a Photoshop expert by any means because Photoshop is so deep that it seems like every week I'm getting a notice that it's being updated. And I'm like, oh, you can do that now? That's awesome.
But your style still is not, I don't think of it as, it is compositions. You're putting several different images together, but it's, so I talked to Bob Wild on a previous interview, and he does sort of grunge art where you're overlaying textures and all sorts of different colors, and you do a little bit of that, but it's very different than the traditional composition graphic artist style that people think of in photography.
Yeah, I hate it when someone says, oh, you Photoshop that, like it's a bad thing. Thinking, no, that's a good thing. And I get this on occasion when people say, well, why can't you be more like Ansel Adams? Thinking that Ansel Adams, everything he did was straight out of the camera. And I'm thinking, okay, that tells me that you don't know about photography. Because I truly believe that if Ansel Adams was alive today, he would be on the forefront of digital Photoshop and all that kind of stuff. Because he spent so much time in the darkroom, dodging and burning and layering and multiple exposures to get what he wanted, what he saw. Mm-hmm. And that's all I'm trying to do. When I take a shot, I have an idea of what I want it to look like. Or so there's sometimes that I'll shoot something and then say, okay, I don't know what I want to do with this, but I like it, so I'm going to save it. And then when I get into Lightroom or Photoshop, then I'll start playing with it and see what I can create.
So this is one of the topics I wanted to ask you about is, in your chosen medium in photography, then how important is it to know what came before, the history and how the art form evolved and what's been done? Are you following any of that, on purpose, or are you? Yeah, how important is it to research that and understand it?
I think it's important to look at other people's work, and I think it's also important to know some of the history. I've never been one to say you have to know Edward Weston and Bresson and Ansel Adams and all these people. It's important to know their work, to recognize it and recognize the genius of that work. But I also think that if you're looking back and always trying to say, I want to do that, then you're not advancing. So you're basically, you want to stand on the shoulders of those people and use the composition techniques, the exposure techniques, and take it to the next level. So I think it's important, but I think it's probably more important to see what other people are doing
Contemporaries.
Yeah, not to copy them, but just to see what to learn. Uh, you need to do your own thing, but looking and seeing what other people are doing, you can get ideas. Um, there's a book that I have called "Steal Like an Artist," and it's such a great. It's Austin Kleon, I think, is the guy's name, um, and he said that basically in art, everything is plagiarism
Mm-hmm.
in a good way. I think David Bowie said it he said it. I look at what other people are doing and steal the best parts.
And nothing is 100% original.
No, nothing is original, and he said that is the way artists and art and music and all these things have progressed. Is people say, "Oh, that's great. I'm going to take that and make it my own." We wouldn't have rock and roll without blues. So it's not that everyone's stealing. It's that they say that's a cool lick. I'm going to take it and make something better out of it. So
Yep.
that's what I do with photography. Is you're always looking at what other people have done and saying, I like that. I'm going to try to do that. Make it my own.
And my own analogy on that is when people ask me, how should I practice my photography? I just want to go out and create my own stuff. Well, look at what other photographers are doing. Can you recreate that? If you see a long exposure, if you see, an action shot that you like, a certain style of portraiture that you like, go out and try and recreate that first. Mm-hmm. Because no musician picked up an instrument and started playing hits from day one. They played covers and they learned their craft. And then they said, now I have developed my ear. Now I can go and create my own music. Same thing goes for photography. You don't want to be playing the covers forever, but you got to start there to understand the principles of why is this a style that I like? Why, how is this image composed and created? Yeah. And now you've got the skills and tools to take you forward.
I like that analogy. I mean, you learn your tools. That's the first thing. You can't, it's not, okay, I'm going to get my camera and then I'm going to be a photographer now. I just spent $3,000 on a camera, so I'm professional now. No, you have to know everything. And this camera back here is 8 years old, and I still don't know what it does. Every once in a while, I'll open it up and say, "Oh, cool, I can do that." But you got to know the tools. You got to know the basics of exposure and learning something about composition. It's always good to look at other art forms. I like to look through painting books to see what the painters are doing in terms of composition. So you learn new techniques there, and then emulate. If you're a landscape photographer, go out and shoot the same places that Ansel Adams did. Try to copy what he did. You will learn a lot by saying, why does this not look like his? Or, holy crap, it looks just like his. I know his secrets.
Right. Or it's different. And I like the way it's different.
Yeah. But that's the thing is you learn from that. And then you can add on to that and say, okay, now I see what he did, but I want to try it this way.
So we kind of already talked about this. Your art is a full-time profession. The photography is a part of that, but so your art, your 3D graphic art definitely is your full-time profession.
It is. And I'm trying to switch the percentages right now. It's about 60%, 65% motion graphics and 3D animation. And I want to switch that. I'd like it to be 100% photography. I enjoy the 3D animation, but it doesn't bring me the joy that photography does. And when I say photography, it's not just the shooting; it's the creating in Photoshop. So, and what's interesting is I found recently that I've been getting into some digital art that I really enjoy doing too. So I don't think the 3D animation is going to go completely away, because I enjoy creating art that will be on the wall digitally through 3D animation and things like that. So
I'm going to switch to sharing some of the images that you gave me for this.
Sure.
Are there any representations in here of what we were talking about, your 3D digital art?
I didn't give you any of that, but this one, the smoke is close to that. This is just incense smoke shot in a really dark room and then reversed, color added. But I've created stuff that's on a white background like this completely in digitally with some of the 3D software I use.
You have a specific style that you're trying to work in? Is that pretty much always the case? Do you always, shoot and photograph the same way or with the same outcome in mind?
I think because of what we're human and we have a set way that we do things. I have a tendency to start to do things the same way. When I process, I do certain steps. I'm trying to get out of that because I don't want to be known for a certain style. I really like to shoot what feels good. Recently, partially because it's been so freaking cold up here in Wisconsin, and I've just decided that I don't like shooting in the cold. I don't like shooting in the snow and ice. So I've been shooting inside a lot. And I'm limited. I don't have a studio, so I'm limited to setting up on the kitchen table or here in the office. So I do a lot of minimalist still lifes. Like this, the top one here with the leaf. That's just a piece of plywood and an old leaf shot with a single flash, and I made a homemade diffuser to diffuse the light. So that's the kind of stuff, and this one of the old film camera here. That's the kind of stuff that I'll shoot now. I'm doing a lot of minimalist stuff now. When in the past, I don't know if I have any I think this is all my favorite stuff now on my, let me go to my landscapes here. There's landscapes or something that I did a lot of, and I haven't done that a lot lately. But even with my landscapes, this shot here of the water, that is, it's mirrored. It's one shot, and I mirrored it, and then went in and kind of made it to where it's hard to tell the mirroring. But I saw this shot, and I said, this needs to be really wide. And I did not have the resolution on my camera to do that. So I said, how can I do that? So I set up the tripod, shot it, and then said, okay, I'll take it in and mirror it. The color blue is kind of what was there, but it looked like this when I shot it. This is Lake Michigan.
Mm-hmm. As far as your specific style, you used to shoot a lot more, landscapes, outdoors, and it kind of transitioned to more of the smaller staged type of items that you would then punch up and turn into art.
Yeah.
Did that happen based on, life events and time available, or is it just based on season, or why do you create different things?
I think some of it's based on season. Some of it is based on life events. I work from home. My wife works a couple days a week, and my son was not in school up until recently. So one of us had to be here with him. So it meant that I didn't get out as much as I liked. So I started shooting indoors. Okay. Some of it was that I've shot so much of the parks around my house, and I'm getting tired of it. I think if you you can live near some of the most incredible landscapes, but if you see it all the time, it gets old. So you need to get out and see new things. And one of my ways of seeing new things is to not go there for a while. I haven't been in these parks in a while.
Because it becomes new again.
Yeah.
Yeah, where I was going with that is, a lot of times people look at what an artist creates and thinks, oh, they're going through a phase. They're, working on something different. And your artist statement said it perfectly. You shoot what's available, what's around you, so that you're always working and creating. And somebody that has a family with a young kid in the house, that dictates a lot of, how much time is available. If I can shoot up something on my desk, set up something and shoot it on my desk real quick when I've got 30 minutes or an hour while they're taking a nap, that's my creative spot for the day.
Yeah. And I think it's important as an artist, even if you don't feel creative and what you are creating doesn't feel good, you got to keep doing it. That's very important. I'm in a creative rut right now, photography related, but I just keep trying. I keep shooting, keep going and doing stuff. Some of these shots that we're showing here were from my 365 project. That is a huge undertaking, but I would say that if you're going to do a 365 project, tell everybody that you're going to do it and get people to look at it, because it forces you to keep doing it. If you say, I'm going to do this every day, and everyone's saying, okay, I can't wait to see what you do, there's motivation there. If you just do it and say, I'm just going to shoot, you'll stop soon.
Is it worth it? If you're a serious artist and you want everything that you publish to have a certain level of polish to it, you're going to stress yourself out on some days when you just don't have time to create a polished piece.
It is worth it. And there are, when I started the project at the very beginning, I said, I'm going to try to do really good work every day. But there will be days when I know I won't be able to create something, or I won't have time. So I set up in there in my own mind that there will be days that I don't do that. So there were days in the 365 project where I wrote down the day on a piece of paper and took a picture of that. And that was my picture of the day.
I remember those. Yeah.
Or I went back and reprocessed an old picture. But shots like this one, I was looking at my Etch-a-Sketch and thought, wouldn't it be cool? How would I do that? I don't know. So I just started shooting, and there's multiple layers in this shot. But
how long did it take to create this?
Probably about 4 hours, start to finish,
including the shots that you put in there and Photoshop time and everything.
Yeah, I had an idea of what I wanted it to be. I didn't. The hand turning the left hand knob there was added at the last minute because I wanted it to be just the guy from inside, which is me, by the way. I can't tell. But I thought it needed more, and so I went in and added it. But I just shot this in my office, and I didn't even have a white background. I had to cut myself off the background. And I shot maybe 40 or 50 shots trying to get the angle just right, where my arm was turned the right way. And then I had to figure out how to make it kind of look like an Etch-a-Sketch. So that goes back to my animation, motion graphics days, knowing some techniques to make that look.
Let's see. We already talked about kind of what your specific style is, and I'm kind of curious where that's evolving next for you. Like you said, you're kind of in a rut right now. Is it because you're tired of creating the same thing? You're trying to move in a new direction, or?
There's a lot of things. Life gets in the way of a lot of that, and so there's just things that prevent me from getting out as much as I'd like and shooting as much. Some of it is equipment. I've always been a believer that the best camera you have is the one that you have with you. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. You don't need to spend $3,000 on a camera and $3,000 on a lens to do what you want. That said, there are limits, and I kind of feel like I've reached the limit. My Nikon D700 is a great camera, but it's 12 megapixels, and I've discovered that I want to print big, and it's hard to do that, and I'm not getting the sharpness that I want out of the lenses that I have. So I feel like that's kind of slowing me down. That's all mental, because everything that you're seeing here was shot with that camera, so I know it's a good camera. But that's a mental aspect that I'm trying to overcome because I can't afford a new camera. So there's that.
You had discussed this some time back. You said partially the reason that this style of editing evolved was because your camera sometimes you'd come out with soft pictures and still wonder, what else can I do with that, right?
Yeah. Well, when someone asks me what camera should I get, it really depends on, do you have one? Do you want to keep your lenses? Whatever. There's a lot of great cameras out there, and they don't have to be full frame, top of the line. Glass is really important. You've got to get good glass. And the glass that I have is either old or cheap. And a lot of the images where I really want that next little step, I miss it. I don't get the sharpness that I want, especially when I'm at the edges of the f-stops, where it's like wide open or all the way down. Mm-hmm. This one was a fun one. This is a multiple exposure because there's no way you can get that reflection in one shot. So I shot the mirror, and then I put the tripod basically on top of the toilet, which is to camera right there, and shot myself on the wall, and then composite it together.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that would be a hard one to do without the camera in the shot, in the mirror.
I tried because I wanted to get it in one shot, but then when I realized I couldn't do it, I said, okay, well, let's figure out how to do it otherwise. And it worked out well because that wall where I'm standing there, I removed the towels and the cabinet behind it and all that. So, because I wanted that minimalist look there. Mm-hmm. And as you can see, I added that's one of the things that I'm kind of getting away from now, but adding the painterly look to it, I still like that, but I want to do something different now with that. So
It makes sense. I'm in the same place where I'd like to have a few sharper lenses, and then I'd like the option to take it the other direction and add the brush strokes and more grain to it. But I don't want to have, like you said, the limitation of having a real nice, clear, sharp photo if I want to print it large.
Yeah, and I've discovered that with some of the sites that I've been invited to be part of. They're saying, "Do you have that any larger?"
Are there any styles that you've tried and just decided weren't for you, that you've abandoned?
Portrait photography is something that doesn't speak to me. Now I've done, and weddings is something that I won't do. I shot one wedding for a good friend of mine in Chicago. I have been second shooter on some weddings, which basically meant that I carried gear. I wasn't actually shooting. But that's not something that I want to do. And portrait photography is something that it's intriguing. And I think if I had a little bit of training and the right equipment, because you got to have, if the eyes aren't sharp when you're shooting portraits, the image is blurry. Doesn't matter what is in focus. If the eyes are soft, you've got a blurry image. Mm-hmm. But that's something that just doesn't appeal to me that much. Event photography is another one. I've done some of it. It's just, it feels hard to me. I like to be out by myself to think about the shot and stew on it a little bit. And when you're doing portraits or event photography for certain, you got to capture the moment. And I guess that goes back to my journalism days. My journalist photojournalism is. I decided I didn't want to do it then. I still don't want to do it. So
interesting. Yeah, I'm starting to find the more I talk to photographers specifically, there's people fall into either the in the moment, like I'm going to capture things as a journalist would, or documentary style event photography, or I'm a contemplative photographer. My art is part of my alone time, where I want to go and think about things, and I want to take it slow down and enjoy the scenery around me. And that's as much part of it as, making the photo itself.
I might get the name of the book wrong, but I think it's The Zen of Photography. I might be wrong about that, but it's written by a photographer who happens to be a Zen master. And he wrote in the book, it's his biography. And near the beginning of the book, he's at an event doing something where it's a workshop with a Zen master, and the Zen master tells them to go out and find something to shoot, but tells them don't shoot it. Wait until the object tells you that it's okay to shoot. And that's very Zen, and I don't really do that, but I do like to go out, and if I see something I like to just sit and look. And I think it's a good practice for any photographer, any artist for that matter, is to not just say, oh, there it is, I'm going to do it. I'm going to shoot this and move on. To spend the time to look at what you see, look at the light, look at distractions. There might be stuff in the background that you don't notice when you first see the scene. Are there better angles to shoot? So it is kind of being with it and saying, okay, now I can shoot this because now I know what my subject is. Mm-hmm. That said, there are times when I go out and say, oh, cool, click, and I keep moving. So
yeah, I've gone both ways. Sometimes I sit there for 15 minutes waiting for the light to be just right, and I realize I really should have shot this scene when I first arrived because that was the best frame.
Now there's no light. No. I know we've done that. It's like, I'm going to wait, and then the light never gets there. So
exactly. Along with things that you don't care for so much, are there any particular styles that intrigue you that you want to practice more?
I'd love to do more night photography, long exposures, and not even light night photography, but low light. So whether it be night or inside. This is where one of the limitations of my kit lens comes into a big effect. Is it's a kit lens, and it's great, but you get what you pay for, and it's dusty on the inside. And so when I do, especially if I'm shooting into lights, Um, Not only do I get the little lens flare that you get with lights, every piece of dust on the inside of my lens shows up, and I get to the point where I can't shoot at night because that of all the dust that's in there. And people say, "Oh, get it fixed." Well, it's expensive to get lenses cleaned and fixed. So
Probably more than the lens costs.
this one definitely. I'd love to send it to Nikon, but Nikon says that, from my understanding, is they don't just clean lenses; they refurbish them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you send it to Nikon, they'll refurbish the lens. So if anything else is wrong with that lens, they'll fix it and then charge me for it.
So it could be a lot more expensive than you bargained for.
Now, my kit lens is a zoom lens. I know you can get away with, if you use prime lenses, you have less glass. So there are things that I can do. I'm not saying that I don't shoot it simply because of my lens. There's other issues with, like, having a child. And at the end of the day, after spending time with him, and I love my kids, my son, so I'm not putting this all on him. But at the end of the day, you're tired. And I'm not getting any younger. And so there's a point where I'm like, I think I'd rather sit in front of the TV tonight or sit in front of the computer and process rather than go out. So that's something that I want to get into. And even though I just said that portrait photography is not something I want to do, I would like to get into fine art portraiture. What is that? More about exploring emotion with people. So it would be something that I would have to have concepts. So in a way, it's kind of like still life, except it's with people.
Interesting. That would be a powerful series.
One of the
I'm sure somebody's touched on it before, but I'm no art historian.
I've been inspired by this for a while. From the Arcanum, you remember Connie?
Yeah. She did a lot of self-portraits, right? Some
of the self-portrait stuff that she did inspired me. And I've done a lot of self-portraits, and I think a lot of photographers do because we know the subject. So, but I'd like to work with some other people doing some of those things. But I would need to find someone that is willing to deal with the uncomfortableness of working with a photographer that doesn't know what he's doing. So.
I hear that a lot from portrait photographers, and where it always comes down to is they say, just do it, just dive in.
Yeah.
You'll find that, the people that you're photographing, unless you just really are terrible, usually they're having as much fun with it as you are.
Yeah.
Are any of these that we're looking at here that I've got any of your best-selling images?
The one with the clouds is a big seller. This is to prove that you can take good pictures out of an airplane, commercial airplane. I wasn't like leaning out the window or something.
We were coming a lot of cleanup and processing, or
actually no. I was lucky enough to. This was probably United Airlines coming back from San Francisco. Obviously late in the day, and this was over the desert Southwest somewhere. And these storms were popping up everywhere. And I was lucky enough to be in a window seat that there was no moisture in there. There were no fingerprints all over it. It was pretty much a piece of clear glass. All I did was stuck my camera, the lens. I took my lens hood off and stuck the lens directly against the glass and put my hands around it to keep glare. Now they had the lights down like they always do in the longer flights. But this is, there's some color correction here and dust removal because I had dust on my sensor. But there's not much done to this. That's why I shot this. I'm like, holy crap, look at that.
Yeah, there are those times when you're photographing, especially sunrises and sunsets, that you look at the colors and you're like, nobody's going to believe this.
Yeah.
They're not going to think it was that color, but it really is.
I think the only thing I did to this was the very top of the image, that blue, there was a little bit of clouds up there. So I wanted that delineation from the anvil part of the storm. So I removed some of that.
It gives us a good sense of scale. If the clouds went all the way to the top of the frame, you couldn't tell how big that cloud bank is.
Yeah. And this is at 35,000 feet, according to the pilot when we were flying.
Wow.
It was a funny story. I went out to San Francisco my wife was out there for a conference, and she said, "Why don't you come out and join me when I'm done? We'll spend a few days." Well, she was flying on her company's dime, so she was flying Virgin Airlines, and her flight left 45 minutes after mine. So she got to fly through these storms instead of around them. I got back and was like, "Oh, it was such a great flight. I got these great pictures." And she was like, "I think I'm going to be sick."
Like, I don't appreciate you right now. Don't tell me that.
I think there's a black and white shot of a tree in here.
Not the forest one there.
No, that it might be down toward them. I don't know if I added that one.
I don't see it in here.
I didn't add that one in there, but it's on my website, scottnorrisphotography.com. There's a shot of a tree that was on the campus of Texas A&M where I went to school, and that's my bestseller by a long shot. Simply because it's got a special place in the hearts of Aggies over the world. So
that's usually the case. The photos that sell the best are the ones that connect emotionally with somebody. Either because they remember that place, or it's a spot that's on their bucket list that they want to go. So they want it, they want it where they see it every day.
And that's an important point to make. Is you always want your images to sell. If you're in this to make money, you want your images to sell. But you need to look at why you're shooting before you start going down that path. Because if you're shooting because I said this will sell, your images won't, because the emotion isn't there. I'm saying you won't. Maybe you will. But you need to shoot because it's an emotional scene. There's some emotion there that you want to share, rather than saying this is a seller. Does that make sense?
I think that shooting because you say this is a seller, this is a scene people will want, works for stock photography.
Yes.
But not for art photography.
No. You need, if you don't have an emotional connection to it, there's a good chance the viewer will not have an emotional connection to it. That's why I know when you're critiquing images, it's very important to know what the artist was trying to do. Mm-hmm. Because as an artist, if you're creating something, if you don't know why you're doing it, who's to say that your viewer will know why you did it or have any connection to it at all?
Your line of thinking here that, if you don't have an emotion for it, or when you're creating it, nobody else can either, speaks to what you said. Your image needs to stand by itself too.
Yeah.
Because usually you don't get to explain yourself. People just see the photo on the wall. They have 3 seconds to decide I like that or I don't, and that's it.
And it's not all black and white. There's a lot of gray there. So
we're talking about the photo or the
Now you might shoot something that you have no emotional connection to that sells like crazy, but that's going to be an outlier.
Yeah.
If you try to put something out there that you're trying to appeal to everybody, you're going to fail. You need to just put the art that you feel is you and put it out there and let the chips fall. Because if you start worrying about what people think about your work, you're always going to be disappointed.
The only other really direction I wanted to take this conversation is along with these things that we know kind of why you've gone this direction, why you like to shoot them. You're trying to create that mood and emotion and some sort of connection to the image. Is there any type of imagery you look at and your mind just doesn't connect with it, that you look at that and it just does nothing for you?
There's probably images. I don't know if there's a particular style. As I've gotten older, when I was younger, modern art, and that I use that term very loosely. I know, and if you're an art historian, there's probably, that was from 1955 to some of the modern art I just didn't get, and I think it was because I was younger. As I get older, there's a lot of art that I appreciate, mostly because I think about what the artist is trying to convey. I think about the artist rather than just looking at the piece. I'm looking at context. I remember when I was living in Houston, and this was 20 some odd years ago, I used to go to the Contemporary Art Museum there, and there was a piece of art that I thought they were doing construction. It was literally a 1x4 that was like 20 feet long, that right in the middle had a plastic bag duct taped to it. And it was called To the Grist Mill. Now, I'm not sure I would get that now, but I think I could appreciate it more then. Then I was just like, this is crap. What is this? I could do this. I think I appreciate a lot of different things. That
says more about that just says a lot about your evolution as an artist and being able to appreciate what other people are working on.
Yeah, fashion photography or boudoir photography, I can appreciate the skill that goes into that. It's not something that appeals to me. That said, it's not something that I'm like, that's crap. It's just not. If someone says, "Hey, we're going to this show and it's all fashion photography," I'm like, "Yeah, okay, I'm not interested."
Why do certain visuals connect with you and others don't?
If I had the answer to that, it would make life a lot easier. I think that's part of the fun about doing what we do, is that you don't know why you're doing it. And through the art, you're exploring things. Art is a very personal endeavor. I think that's one of the reasons that many artists are. You might see people that are flamboyant and outgoing, and you think, they've got it, they know what they're doing, and when you talk to them, they are insecure. And part of that is because you're sharing yourself. You have a show, people are looking at your work. This is you, and opening yourself up like that. It puts you in a vulnerable position. So, I think that's why I do what I do, is just to explore my inside. It's it's kind of therapy in a way. And I actually have done that before where I'm feeling depressed or whatever, that I'll shoot things that kind of explore those as a kind of a therapy, a way to get through it. I don't think I had any of those images to you, but there were some in my 365 project where upstairs in our a building here, the second floor was empty, and I went up there and shot some what I consider pretty powerful shots. And it happened to be when I posted them on Facebook that my wife was at my in-laws, and she called me and said, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm exploring some aspects. I'm okay."
Before we end here, I've got several different links where you can find Scott's work, and I'll post those in the notes, of course, with the show. We've got scottnorrisphotography.com, Flickr, still using Flickr, good to see. Twitter, /Scott Norris Photo, and then the project that we talked about at the beginning, 39.com, artists/Scott Norris. You can find him on Fine Art America. That's where the majority of your bestsellers are going to be found, right?
Yep. Most of my online work.
Sell through your website or direct?
I do, but it's rare. I've been putting a lot of effort into promoting Fine Art America because there are millions of people looking at that every day, and I've got tens of people looking at my website. So do the math.
All right. And then finally, we've got LO Scott Norris Photography and Facebook.com/Scott Norris Photography. So you can find him in all the popular places. And then if you're a fine art photographer or a fine art collector, go to fineartamerica.com or scottnorrisphotography.com. You can find all of his work there.
I'm also on other sites, but I just figured we'll limit to that. If you want to find me on other places, text me.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Scott, for being here.
It's my pleasure. It was a great time.
Hopefully we'll circle back around and show us something new if you got it down the road. All right, so my takeaways and follow-up from that conversation with Scott. Obviously, I knew him before we did this conversation, and a lot of times, most of the time, I don't know the artist that I'm interviewing, so everything is brand new to me. Even with Scott, there were several things there that were new takeaways, new information for me. So number one is that for him at least, photo is just one element, and it's just a jumping off point to create his art. So if you're a purist, and especially if you do a lot of photo competitions, you can't really edit those photos before you submit them. So you're going to have to stick with the photo and just do small adjustments. But Scott is selling his photography as art, and that's really how he approaches it. So combining his photography along with his 3D art, and just combining all of those skills, use everything at your disposal to create what gets you to your end goal, no matter what you call it, whether it's photography or digital art or whatever. And for Scott, that's at the end to get people to realize a mood or an emotion out of his photography, so that they, when you view a piece, you feel something, you connect with it in a way, even if he's not standing over your shoulder saying, this is what I want you to understand about this piece. So, which really to me is the definition of an artist. You create something that people can walk past and they go, ooh, I connect with that. I understand it. I appreciate that, even though I've never met the artist. So, yeah, there were two big things. The final thing I think for me is really using whatever is available to photograph and to work with to create your art. So whether that's limitations, or maybe even the limitations can lead you down that path to create specific things. And Scott doesn't have the latest camera and the latest lenses, and he'd like to upgrade his equipment, but I just decided that's not going to stop me. I'm still going to create what's in my mind. I'm going to get out there, and he doesn't do it through travel where he gets into a new environment all the time and sees new things that stimulate him, but rather sees everyday things in his everyday life in a different and new way, which leads him to create that art. So yeah, whatever your takeaways are, they may or may not be the same as mine, doesn't matter. But anyway, that's what I got out of that conversation, some new ways to look at just photography and art for me. And if you want to participate, or if you want to find more of these videos, go to visualliteracyproject.com. That's my website where I'll be posting all of these interviews. And then if YouTube is more your thing, just look me up there, Kevin Wenning, KevinWenning. And you can just look it up there. I've got a playlist there with all of the Visual Literacy Project stuff there. So if you also want to get involved, if you're an artist who has a unique style, a unique way of looking at the world, I would love to talk with you. Kevin@visualliteracyproject.com is my email. You can reach out to me there. And cheers. Hope you enjoyed this, and come check out more of them. All right. Be well.